Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome aboard. It's a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. Cheers to each and every one of you guys that made it here live. Kind of impromptu, a little bit unannounced, but the Contender Series, guys, has been a grind for me. I'm really trying to produce high quality work for the Contender Series with my brother Gordo, as well as on my own channel, but also for the patrons. I have a Patreon. I do a ton of MMA research on a weekly basis. And so the Contender Series has really been eating up my early weeks. However, it's pay-per-view week, baby. It's UFC 292. It's UFC Boston. It's UFC Aljamain Sterling against Suga Sean O'Malley. We're talking about two title fights on this card. Don't get it twisted. Two title fights. So it's absolutely fascinating card to break down. I'm excited to do it. And without further ado, let's get started with our first look this week, guys. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. Appreciate you guys being here. Want to just say off the top, I'm going to come back to you guys on Thursday later on in the week. I already have a guest lined up, looking to get another one, have a power panel for the pay-per-view for bets and banter on Thursday. However, I'm going to come to you guys before I do my tape study right now, and I'm going to just tell you my initial impressions, my gut feeling. I do actually have a bet already on this card as well. So, we're going to dig into, some of what we're thinking about these early lines for the UFC. However, I'm going to do more due diligence. I'm going to do more research. You guys know me, no stone left unturned. I'm going to really try and dig in. And by Thursday, I'll have a much more informed opinion. But I don't want to leave you guys hanging. Let's dig into these fights. I know everybody's anxious to discuss. So without further ado, let's get right into it, guys. We've got the main event. And if you guys have never been here for a first look before, on the first look, we start at the top of the card and work our way down. During bets and banter, we start at the bottom and work our way up to that main event. So we're going to start at the main event and work our way down here. And what a fascinating, interesting main event that we have. Aljamain Sterling, let's disclose some biases right out the gate. D3 Wrestling, check that box. New York in the building, check that box. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, check that box. Ray Longo guy, check that box. Love Aljamain Sterling. Has he cashed bets for me before? Yes. Has he made me look like a genius when I said he was going to, beat Jan in the rematch and take him down and look better in the wrestling, and that it mattered that he had gotten surgery? Yes, absolutely. And so when I look at this matchup on paper, guys, I, have to say right off the rip that I have some biases coming in. However, we're dealing with an O'Malley. We're dealing with an Irish guy. We're dealing with a fun striker. We're dealing with a guy who smokes some reefer and gets down and knows how to have a good time. Who doesn't like Sean O'Malley? He's still a fun guy. He's a guy that produces interesting sound bites. So I really think that both of these guys are compelling characters. I think both of them, have reasons to be supported. I think both of them have interesting stories to tell here. And it's not, I feel like this fight, everybody wants to pretend like we know exactly how it's going to go. It's either going to be Aljo by sub or it's going to be Sean by knockout. And that for me is the first problem here. I feel like that's an oversimplification, right? We've got two guys that are fascinating martial artists. And when you look at this matchup on paper, right? Sugar Sean O'Malley, how would he win it, right? If you're going to make a case for an underdog, let's start with him. He's the underdog in this matchup. I'm going to pull up Odds Jam here just because I like to be able to see the best available market price at the time that I'm discussing in my jurisdiction here. And I'm coming to you live from the great state of New York. So shout out to each and every one of you guys that's rocking with me. I'm going to ask you guys one personal favor off the rip here. Just drop a like on this video if you don't mind. Let people know that we're here rocking. Sharpest chat in the game, rocking with us each and every week. It's 1:23 here local time, but I know that more and more people are going to continue to pile in as we get this conversation going. So God bless you all. Appreciate you guys being here. And let's get back to this matchup at hand. So best available market price here in the great state of New York on the Sugar Sean O'Malley side is plus 218 on the WinBet, sportsbook. And you're looking at minus 240 at the chalk price for Aljamain Sterling here, the champion, coming in a minus 240 price tag, the challenger, the plus 218 on the comeback. So you're looking at that price on Aljo at William Hill, Caesars Sportsbook. You're looking at the best available under at DraftKings Sportsbook, minus 166 to the under 4.5 rounds. You're looking at the best available over at the 3.5 round mark, over 3.5 rounds plus 100 on Bet River Sportsbook. So very interesting matchup here on paper. My initial read here, my initial gut feeling, the thing that I was thinking about early on was, this fight is probably going to end inside the distance. The reason I felt that way, I felt like both guys have a very clear path to a finish. I think Sean O'Malley is a dangerous striker. I think he could win the fight by knockout. I think that Aljamain Sterling is a dangerous grappler. He also has very good ground and pound. We saw that in the TJ Dillashaw fight, which I know everybody wants to remove from the sample size, and I understand that. But we also saw that in the Petr Yan rematch when he took him down, put him in the body triangle. He was attempting a lot of subs, which is scoring points with the judges, also putting yourself in a position to finish. But he also did a number on him with the elbows. I felt like he was being disrespected at various points in the aftermath of that fight. In terms of how people were scoring it, people had scored that fight for Yan. Some people, I didn't see that. I thought that the first 3 rounds went to Aljo, but I thought most importantly, there was an argument for 10-8 rounds in the first 2 where he's getting the back, where he's controlling, majorities of the round from that back body lock position, from the body triangle. But he also leveraged that position to dominant positions where he could finish, wrapping the wrist, going for elbows to the side and the back of the head. And then I saw everybody betting on it. And I saw the fact that it had opened at a plus money number on most sports books. So I thought that was interesting here as well. Why is the sports book kind of tempting you to bet the under here? I think that O'Malley by KO has seemed very popular on Twitter. I'm seeing a lot of people, even very casual accounts, not sports betting accounts, just like MMA fans, like, how is this not a lock? And it's O'Malley by KO in round 1. So when I see that, that gives me, an eerie feeling of a fight that's probably going to end up going over. Shout out to Curtis Clark. Hit the like. He says, I appreciate that, Curtis. And shout out to the chat. I'm curious what you guys think about this fight because it's a really compelling main event here. We've got a bunch of people saying that they think the over here is interesting. Londo says over 4.5 at plus money. I kind of like it. Mimi says both guys have had the shadiest run. Suga by sub. I mean, I think comparing the run of Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley is not quite fair. But I do think that Moyes makes a good point where he says everything is set up for Sean to win, even the new rules within the unified rules of MMA. And I know what you're talking about there. Some of those, take a knee, stall out kind of positions that we see from Aljo at times. And that would beg the question, does this fight go deep? Because we've seen a historical trend from Aljamain Sterling, which is that he is a fantastic 15-minute fighter, right? We saw it in the Pedro Munhoz fight where he was able to throw an insane amount of volume, but he did look like he was tapering off right at the end of that 3rd round. We've basically seen him have 15 optimal minutes of performance, and then he has to skate by in those last 2 rounds. He kind of did that playing with the danger factor against Henry Cejudo, just letting that fight be well within the margins, letting it be a very close fight, letting it be very competitive. And, what killed me about the Henry Cejudo result was that at the beginning of the year, I was on Dan Levy, Best Fight Picks. Shout out to him. We've done 2 years in a row now, our predictions for the year, and we've done pretty well with some of them. But one of my predictions for the year was that Aljamain Sterling was going to retire, win or lose against Henry Cejudo. And obviously I was wrong about that. But he had talked about for the longest time, if you guys go back, I have plenty of examples of him in interviews talking about he wanted to retire early, he wanted to retire young, he wanted to retire at 33, all these things. And now he's 34 years of age. He's saying 99.9% chance this is my last fight at bantamweight. And that for me is a little bit concerning, mildly concerning here. When you're talking about what makes this a tricky fight, right? I could give a compelling narrative case that, do I really want to lay, minus 240 against an O'Malley in Boston, right? It's like, we got to be serious here. I feel like if this is a fight that's at all within the margins, O'Malley's probably going to get the nod. I feel like when you think about how the crowd is going to react in this fight, I feel like O'Malley's going to have the bulk of the crowd support in all likelihood, and that can occasionally sway decisions, right? Especially in very close fights. I imagine if this fight gets to the scorecards, it's going to end up being close. I think Sean has good cardio. I think he can normally push a strong pace, but it's going to be interesting how he reacts if he's forced into an extended grappling fight, because we haven't seen that. And we have seen, times where he's lost the third round in the Sukmatov fight from an injury. He got TKO'd. Anybody I've asked about this is telling me that there's a 0% chance that Aljo wins by knockout. And, the sports books disagree, right? Because when you look at how this opened up on Bet Online, it opened up, I think, plus 500. It's now plus 400. Way outlier, like really low price from them. When you look at how it reacted on DraftKings, FanDuel, they opened plus 900s. They're down to plus 600s. Market wide, that's about the number. So it just seems to me like Aljamain Sterling doesn't get any credit for his ground and pound. And it's something that he takes pride in. If you listen to his interviews, what he's talking about is going out there and getting the knockout, getting a TKO, getting a finish early via strikes against this guy, breaking the twig. So I found all that very interesting as well. But it's just a difficult fight for me to project out on paper. I think that you look at I like to look at archetypes of who's beaten somebody in the past and does this fit that archetype. And I also look at projections, right? You've got the younger guy who's going to have the intangibles here in size and reach and these things, and he's a big plus money underdog, and he's being put in a favorable situation where the matchmakers would prefer he would win. But I think that Dean Morrow is on the money here, where he says Aljo can win by ground and pound. Would make sense. The most expected fight outcome in paper main event is also the least likely. I feel that. That's why I think there's some interest in the Aljo by TKO, because I don't think anybody thinks it's going to happen. And I feel like that's one of the most likely outcomes potentially. Stimmy says, my gut feeling is Aljo backpack. It's a wrap. Clint likes Suga. Yeah, and he likes it big, which I found interesting as well. I think some people are talking about the O'Malley decision line. It's very wide. It's about 10-1. I think that's very interesting, in a bantamweight fight where we just saw Aljo go right to the wire. But Henry Cejudo is a former Olympic champion in wrestling, and Aljo, it surprised me that he was able to out-wrestle him. I thought Aljo could win that fight. I thought he could be strategic. I thought he could use his jiu-jitsu. I thought if he popped on Henry's back, he could change the complexion of the fight. But him out-wrestling Henry Cejudo for the bulk of that fight was surprising to me, and it did tell me that Aljo's wrestling is at a very high level. I don't like the fact that he was talking about injuries on Ariel Helwani's show 3 months ago, and talking about the fact that I have to wait a week and a half and see if I can even, do this fight next. But it just seemed to me like all the videos he's posting, all the work that he's been doing, all the workouts he's been doing, he looks fine. And he looks like he's going to be on weight as well. So I'm going to wait to see the weigh-in here. I did pick Henry against Aljo. That's what I'm saying. So that's why it surprised me that he out-wrestled him, right? Like I could have seen Aljo winning a fight on the feet, but just to see him out-wrestle him was really surprising to me. And it did make me think that Aljo's wrestling is even better than I thought. You look at how Corey Sandhagen has easily out-wrestled his last two opponents, and he certainly made more of a commitment to those positions. But just look at how Aljo completely dominated Corey in that fight. I feel like it speaks to his skill and maybe the level gap at times between Aljo's grappling and the rest of the division. And we haven't really seen a lot of guys push Sean in the grappling. So I think it's, a really difficult test for both guys. If Aljo gets too ego-driven in this fight and he starts swinging with Sean on the feet, we've seen what happens against Marlon Moraes. He can get kicked in the head. He could not see strikes coming. The state of New York won't let him fight here because of brain scans that he's had. So I do think that Aljo, his number one, way to get finished in a fight is to get clipped on the chin and hurt, knocked out, especially by long, rangier kickers. So That for me is a little bit concerning. Let me hear what Dean Morrow says. He says, I was at Aljo's workout in person on Friday. He looks slimmed down a ton. Should be a relatively easy weight cut. He was around 150 at that time. O'Malley has never been submitted, actually has a lot of grappling experience. Yeah, I think people are maybe overestimating the sub equity here, but not by a lot, because I do think that this is how I was describing it. I was at jiu-jitsu earlier, so that's why I'm a little late tonight, guys. But I was describing it as I feel like Sean has good jiu-jitsu for MMA, whereas Aljo has good jiu-jitsu, period. He's got very good jiu-jitsu that's very competitive. I don't know exactly what's wrong, but there was something on his brain scans where the state of New York will not let him fight here because they're very averse to risk. And, that's why his last headlining gig was in the Prudential Center in New Jersey. It was as close as he can get to home for the time being. So the Sarah Jiu-Jitsu representative, I do think he's got a higher Jiu-Jitsu pedigree. I believe he actually beat Sean O'Malley's Jiu-Jitsu instructor in the UFC, if my memory serves as well. Let me look through Aljo's bouts here. Augusto Mendez. Yeah, I think Augusto Mendez is one of the wrestling coaches and grappling coaches for Sean O'Malley. I will say this, Mimi. We saw Jan take Aljo down 7 times, even if he's injured. Yeah, but he was so injured to the point where he looked completely physically weak, and then he got a repair done to his shoulder, and he did not look physically weak in the rematch, and he absolutely bodied the man in the wrestling. So I think that's what was the difference. And by the way, that was exactly how I broke it down prior to the fight. Aljo said in interviews that his arm was hurt and that he could not be himself in that fight. And he looked scared from the beginning. He didn't look like he wanted to be out there. He looked like he was tiring out. He looked like he was panicking. And I felt like that was, for me, a believable response. He does his show. If you guys have ever listened, he does his podcast of weekly scraps. I used to listen to it, and he had done a show right after he won the title, and he talked exactly about what had happened with the DQ and everything in that fight. And he's like, I'm going to get my surgery. I'm going to get fixed. I'm going to rehab it, and I'm going to beat this guy. And he came back and he did it. And so, these guys need to do it. They need to get title fights. They need to take money. I don't know about the knee to the head. I'm not going to pretend to know what happened there. All I know for sure is that when Aljo had the rematch and they did it fair and square, Aljo was the better man. And I thought that spoke volumes. Hopefully they get to do it again one day down the road, and they could settle that the old-fashioned way in a rubber match. But in any case, I felt like Aljo did his thing. He won that fight. I felt like he deserved to win that fight. He went out there against TJ Dillashaw. He can't do anything about the fact that TJ is injured. What's he supposed to do about that, really? He just did his job, took him out. By the way, the KO line was dropping like a stone right before that fight, so I ended up putting down some on the KO. And that was like plus 900 against TJ. It's down to like plus 600 in this fight against O'Malley, which I think speaks some volumes as well. So I at various points this week thought about betting the ends by KO, but I haven't gotten anything on this fight. I feel like I'm going to start from zero here. I'm going to start from square one, and I'm just going to tape this fight. I'm going to go into it. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to do my due diligence, and I'm going to feel my way through it, and I'm going to feel if there's anything worth betting here, but I don't have very strong conviction here one way or the other. And I just got to give it to you straight, right? I don't feel all that convicted. If I was pressed right now for a pick, I would say, give me Aljamain Sterling via backpack knockout. But I just don't feel great about a prediction on this fight right now. Shout out to my guy Furio. He says, here a bit late. How do you feel about the under 4.5 and fight doesn't go to decision? That was my initial gut lean here, Furio, and I thought about betting it, but then the price kind of got away from me, right? It got all the way chalked out to the minus 175 and such for the fight not to go. And so that for me is a little bit steep on chalk. I did think about playing it for a unit because I feel like both guys have paths to finish, and I feel like Aljo has multiple paths really to the finish. So that makes this a really interesting fight doesn't go. But I also could just see this fight, we have had a recent sample size of Aljo when he's in there with competitive fighters, guys that are really pushing him, going to decision. So um, it's an interesting fight. Also, we don't know how Sean's going to try and pace himself here over 5 rounds. I think this is his first 5-round fight in his career. If my memory serves, I'd have to double check that. But really, really interesting fight on paper. And it's curious because if Aljo wins this one, you'd have to think that he's going to be calling out Volkanovski because he said he doesn't want to fight at 35 anymore. So he's either going to retire or call out Volkanovski or who knows. But if Sean O'Malley wins, all hell's breaking loose and, the division's going to be on fire. So I don't think that anything bad can come of this fight. If Aljo loses here, I do think he's still a great champion. I do still think he's worthy of respect. I do still think people don't give him the credit that he deserves. I don't know that I'd go so far as to call him the bantamweight GOAT. I do think that might be a little bit, of a stretch, but I think he's put together a hell of a win streak at 135 pounds. I think most of it he did the right way. He earned a lot of those wins. He did it the hard way. And, the one blip against Jan, he went back and redeemed himself there. So I feel like he deserves that credit, but we also can say, Sean O'Malley deserves respect. He's handled his career the right way. He's gone to the Chael Sonnen School of Promotion, the easiest guy in front of the most eyeballs for the most dollars and to get the biggest opportunities. So for me, it just seems like both of these guys have a compelling case to make, and I got to do my due diligence before I get out of hand on this fight. But next up, I got a fight that I feel a little bit better about. We've got the co-main event of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, and it is between Weili Zhang, Maverick, and Amanda Lemos. And Amanda Lemos is a fun fighter. She brings the heat. She's got power on the feet. She's a Brazilian banger. But I think that this is a fight where, they're kind of trying to put together a showcase a little bit for Weili Zhang. And I could be wrong about that. But when I look at this on paper, guys, I think that Amanda Lemos is dangerous. She's got big power. She could definitely win fights by knockout, but she's also susceptible. The Angela Hill split decision probably is a fight that she was lucky to get her way. It was a close fight. She almost won that fight by knockout, but didn't show the best finishing instincts in that fight. And Angela Hill, she led her back into it. And Angela Hill was able to really work her way back in that fight, make it competitive, make it, a scrap down the stretch where she was lucky to win it over 3 rounds. Against Maryna Rodrigues, guys, I bet her there, right? I thought that Maryna Rodrigues was way overrated. She's a primary striker coming in a WMMA bout against another knockout puncher. And, she's being lined like she's already won the fight, minus 250 and such. That just seemed insane to me, right? Because Amanda Lemos on the other side, who was more likely to submit whom in that fight? I felt like Amanda Lemos was way more likely to submit Maryna Rodrigues than the other way around because she's more aggressive in taking fights to the ground and looking for submission opportunities. But Maryna Rodrigues, she normally has pretty good defensive grappling and she normally has good precision pinpoint striking. So that can really bother girls, but it doesn't bother Amanda Lemos, who's willing to have that striking matchup. She was more than happy to accommodate, and her power and physicality bore out in that fight. So I cashed that underdog ticket. It was a very nice hit. I also, though, faded every which way but loose Amanda Lemos when she was taking on our girl Jessica Andrade. And I think this was the last time that I bet on our girl Jessica Andrade. It's been a little while here since. I'm pulling up the photo right now. But my previous Bet MMA history on Amanda Lemos, I had Jessica Andrade 3 units for the under 4.5 rounds. 3 units on the Jessica Andrade points handicap, minus 5.5, and 1 unit on Jessica Andrade by submission there. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. That was a good read. And that was a time when a lot of people were drinking the Amanda Lemos juice, and they were saying that, Amanda Lemos, this is her time, and she's going to come in and get the win. And I just said to myself, number one, both of these women have competed at 135 pounds. So who's stronger than who, you know? But number two, you look at how Jessica Andrade, deals with powerful opponents. She starts swinging back in the pocket, and she'll occasionally look for takedowns, look for grappling, look to mix it up. Against her recent opponents, Tatiana Suarez, Erin Blanchfield, where's she going to go? Where's she going to take the fight down to? Against Yan Xiaonan, she just ended up getting banged out on the feet before she could ever take the fight to the ground. But in those other fights, her opportunity to take the fight to the mat wasn't there. Jessica Andrade likes to be more physical than girls, and she likes to do jiu-jitsu. But guys, if I could tell you, when I bet that, you could have given me a million guesses, and standing arm triangle choke would not have been on my bingo card. You know what I'm saying? Standing arm triangle chokes, I almost got one in a grappling match that I had against a good opponent. So it's not to say against a good opponent for the blue belt level. To be clear, there's levels to jiu-jitsu, but I really rate this guy. I think he's got good skills. I had a tough time competing against him, right? I've gone against him twice. I'm 1-1 against him. So good competitor. And, I had locked up a standing head and arm choke, but it's very difficult to finish. It's very, very difficult to create leverage. But the cage, I suppose, can make it a little bit easier. But you look at the fight over the weekend, and somebody attempted a head and arm choke. I'm drawing a blank right now, but over the last UFC card on Saturday, somebody attempted a standing head and arm choke, and the guy just like, oh, I think it was actually Vicente Luque, and RDA just was like, get off me, man. Like, what are you doing? And the commentators were like laughing about it, right? Amanda Lemos, when she gets caught in that choke, guys, she looks like Greg Hardy underneath Marcin Tybura, right? She looks like she's a white belt, right? Her eyes go wide, hands up in the air. She looked like she was seeing a ghost. She was like, and it just, for me, it was like the ultimate sign that her grappling is just not up to speed with her striking. And a lot of what she does relies on the physicality edge and gap that she has between herself and other women. And I think that Weili Zhang has the strength and physicality to make up that gap. You look at the stats on paper, she's averaging, 2 takedowns per 15 minutes here. So I think that you look at Amanda Lemos' takedown defense on paper, yeah, it's quite good, but she hasn't really had a lot of real wrestling threats trying to take her down. I think that Zhang Weili can take her down in this fight if she so chooses. I think that she has the superior ground game. You look back on her Instagram after the after the Carla Esparza fight, she was awarded her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. She continues to work on all aspects of her game. Her striking looks absolutely lethal right now. Her power looks good. The one thing I will say is it's rare to see an under 3.5 in a WMMA fight at -200. So that was notable for me. Very juiced unders here. People are really expecting this fight to end inside the distance, to end violently. And I kind of feel the same way, and I do think that Zhang Weili is the side here. I think she's going to get it done. I think she's the more powerful girl. I think she hits harder, and I think her preparation is great. When I look at this, though, I do say to myself, the one danger factor is that Weili Zhang, if you had to say like a flaw to her game, because she's very good, the only flaw is that sometimes her chin is a little bit suspect, right? I think it was the Danielle Taylor fight way back in the day. She kind of got buzzed in that fight, looked a little bit rocked, and she definitely absorbed a lot of damage against Joanna Jędrzejczyk in their first meeting. We also saw that she, got knocked out by Rose Namajunas via head kick, right? And I talked about the good bets I've had, right? I talked about Amanda Lemos. I've made 10 units of profit betting on Amanda Lemos fights, but I've lost hand over fist betting on Zhang Weili in the past because I bet her against Rose Namajunas in the fights where she came up short. So I do think, it's important to be transparent, and I've done well with one fighter. I've done poorly with the other. But for me, I do feel like this is a fight where Zhang Weili should have the advantages. I don't feel like going out and laying the -350 chalk, but I think she's going to end up winning this fight. So give me Zhang Weili as the pick here as my first look, and definitely going to be eyeing the prop market here for some potential bets. Check the Patreon. Next up, we got Marlon Chito Vera taking on Pedro Munhoz in the featured bout of the evening on pay-per-view. This is a pivotal bantamweight matchup because you got two guys that, could really use a win right now. Pedro Munhoz coming off a unanimous decision win over Chris Gutierrez, but that was definitely a step down in competition for him. So now he's taking a step back up into this top 10 in the division against a guy in Chito Vera who was definitely exposed by Corey Sandhagen in his last fight. Don't believe the split decision rumors that you might have heard on Tapology. That was a one-way ass kicking, and Corey was swinging the hammer. When you look at what happened in that fight and what went wrong, in my opinion, is that Marlon Chito Vera can be out-grappled and out-wrestled. That is basically the primary way to defeat him over the course of his career. Let's go back and look at his resume. Corey Sandhagen beats him by decision, out-wrestled him, out-grappled him, was beating him on the feet as well. But when it was on the feet, it was more competitive, especially down the stretch. It was the ability to mix up the game, to take it to multiple phases that won that fight for him. You look at Frankie Edgar, 1 rounds using wrestling, and then all of a sudden, Chito Vera, big kick to the face, fight is over shortly thereafter. Rob Font was outlanded him, I believe, by over 100 significant strikes, but he ended up knocking out Rob Font 3 times, and the referee just didn't have the good sense to stop it. So it went all 5 rounds. I had Chito Vera on the money line. I had Chito Vera ITD. It was a sickening non-stoppage there. Rob Font was beat within an inch of his life, unfortunately. Just like I had Corey Sandhagen sub round 5. So that for me was gutting. But you look at the Dominic Cruz fight. Dominic Cruz, that to me was the fight where I just saw how old he was and felt like he really had lost a step in the division. The Davey Grant fight, somewhat competitive, but really he just beat him up down the stretch, came on strong late. That's Chito Vera classic, and beat him up down the stretch there. But look at the Jose Aldo fight, guys. What happened in that fight? He ended up getting out wrestled. He ended up getting out grappled. In the first round, it was competitive striking, but it was by round 3 that we saw Jose Aldo back body triangle, easy control, and grappled this guy away. Pedro Munhoz, guys, you could say a lot of positive things about him. He's got good calf kicks. He's a very durable guy. He's got an elite guillotine. He can really swing and bang in the feet. He could go in the pocket. And I think that when I look at how he matches up with Chito Vera, I don't love it. I think that Chito Vera is a guy that hits hard. I think that Chito Vera is a guy that has really good linear kicks. I feel like Pedro Munhoz is a little bit hittable. At this stage of his career, he's 36 years of age at bantamweight. I think he's a little bit slower. Sean O'Malley, kind of struggled to get off in that fight, but really was just trying to chip away with low kicks there, which is hard to do against Pedro, who likes to check low kicks. But I do think that this is a fight where, maybe the mixing up of kicks, the mixing up of some clinch work from the bigger fighter here in Chito Vera. Let me just confirm that size advantage. Yeah, he's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage as well as a 2-inch height advantage. So I think if Chito Vera comes out here pumping the jab and, working behind his long kicks, I think that this is a winnable fight here for Chito Vera. And, everybody talks about the guarantee that this fight is going over. If you look at anybody talking about this fight on Twitter, you look at anybody talking about this fight online, 2 durable guys, this fight's a guarantee to go over. That's just not the way I approach MMA, guy. I'm not a absolutist, right? I'm never going to tell you, like, this is a 100% surefire lock, unless it's Shavkat Rakhmonov against Neil Magny. Unless it's that, I'm not going to tell you guys that anything is a lock. That's not how I do it. I don't speak in absolutes. I don't believe in that. I'm just trying my best to ascertain odds that are better than the probabilities being offered by bookmakers, right? And when I'm looking at a fight like this, I think that Chito Vera could absolutely knock out Pedro Munhoz. Look at what Cody Garbrandt landed over and over and over again on the feet against this guy. And then they get into the crazy exchange where the leg kicks were adding up. Cody Garbrandt goes full suicide mode, and just went all out, bang in the pocket until some man falls. And I felt like in that fight, I saw a guy who could get knocked out, but just was on the right end of the exchange, went his way. He kept landing. he kept getting landed on and he took the shots better. But he's 36 years of age. I don't think that's going to last forever. I think that Jose Aldo absolutely took him to school with a boxing lesson there, whereas Jose Aldo was starting to get tuned up on the feet by Chito Vera. And he said, I got to take this to the ground. I got to mix things up here. I got to put this guy in a back body triangle, because if I stay on the feet with this guy, I'm going to get hurt. And I think that Chito Vera is the meaner fighter. I think he wants it badder. I think he'll poke you in the eye. I think he'll kick you in the nuts. I think he'll scum you. I think he'll just do a little bit more to win at the end of the day. So I think Pedro Munhoz is a guy that can grit out decisions. I think he's got a nasty guillotine. He's got great jiu-jitsu. I don't expect Chito Vera is going to out-grapple him here offensively. But what I do think is that on the feet, Chito Vera is probably going to get the better of the exchanges. I expect him to win a fight that stays striking. So give me Chito Vera here, on first look. And I'm going to dig into this a little bit. I think let me pull up my BetMMA.tips. I believe I had Chito Vera, or excuse me, Pedro Munhoz is what I meant to say, in his last bout on the money line. Let me just check if I'm accurate there. So Pedro Munhoz. Yeah, I had one unit on Pedro Munhoz plus 180 against Chris Gutierrez. So I'm not a Pedro Munhoz hater. When he's taking steps down in competition, I feel like he's got those spots. But a lot of people are talking about, hey, Chito gives away the first round. Yeah, but then he normally is like having a guy clinging to life in the third round. Even the fight he lost against Song Yadong, he really protested that decision. It was very close. And Song Yadong, we've seen all the success that he has had in the UFC. So his only losses prior to that were against Douglas Silva de Andrade in 2018, John Lineker in 2017, Davey Grant in 2016. And this guy's never been finished, but he's still only 30 years of age. And I feel like he can still go with these guys at the very top end in the division, whereas Jose Aldo on his way out still tuned up Pedro Munhoz like an old guitar. And that's no disrespect. But he's not a guy that implements his best skills, his wrestling and his grappling. He'd prefer to stand on the feet and box. And I just think that at his height, at his size, that puts him at a systemic disadvantage. And, give me Marlon Chito Vera here. I think that Tatiana Suarez would absolutely be a terrible matchup for Weili Zhang. To the people in the comments, we got a lot of Suarez love out there, and I appreciate that for sure. I want to shout out to the chat here. Any questions you guys have on this fight, go ahead and throw them in here before we move to the next one. But wanted to address this question from Mimi. Says, Liam, can you tell me what Weili did in her last matchup against Carla? Is that a real thing? Reverse crucifix, rear naked choke. So yes and no. Are most of the time, are you going to see that exact submission play out in really high-level BJJ matches? No. There's some elements of damage. There's some elements of fatigue, but absolutely people are looking to control an arm to get the rear naked choke. I mean, what's the hardest thing about choking somebody? It's not taking the back, right? Think about Aljo, all the times he's backpacked somebody. Backpacking somebody, getting to the triangle on the back is doable. It's the hand fight from the back that becomes so difficult. Why? Because I'm in an advantageous position where I'm behind you on your back. But if I don't have your arms controlled, then it's my two hands against your two hands. So it's a very difficult hand fight. Whereas if I can control using my legs, your arm, then it becomes a 1-on-2 battle, favoring my arms for a choking situation. So you always want to try and control your opponent's arm, but oftentimes in jiu-jitsu, that takes the form of a, lock from behind where you then use your leg to control their arm, from the back position. So you're like pinning it to their body more often than not. But yes, you can do it from a crucifix. You could do a no hooks rear naked choke. There's all sorts of different ways to finish. But basically, you grab a hold of somebody's neck or you grab a hold of somebody's neck and their arm, and you got a really good squeeze and you could be in business. So that's the start of it. But I'm glad that you asked that question. It's a really good one. Sucker punch, rear naked choke. Nate Landwehr, great setup. I love it. I absolutely love it. Shout out to Baldy Man as well in the chat. Shout out to everybody who's a regular here. Appreciate y'all being here. Rick the Ruler says Cheeto going to give the first round away. Then who knows? Probably Cheeto decision. Yeah, I think everybody's expecting a Cheeto decision, but I'm telling you, man, if he was the first man to knock out Pedro Munhoz, don't color me surprised. That's all I'm going to say. I haven't looked at the props for this. Let me pull up some bestfightodds.com and see what props they're dealing here. It's the worst designed website of all time, folks, so please bear with me as I try and find this. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Vera by KO is only plus 500. What a disgusting number for a guy who's never been knocked out in Pedro Munhoz. But yeah, I feel like that's definitely a possibility, though. I really think people are going to underrate the finishing equity on the Cheeto side, personally. What's up, Liam? Thoughts on Cheeto Munhoz ending via split decision? You know, if it does go to the cards, I think that's a great call. You know, somebody scored the last fight for Cheeto and he didn't win a round. So anything's possible in this game, brother. And the split decision odds are probably going to be huge. So shout out to my brother from another Fight Talk Only, does one of the best community collaborations every week on Twitter. So make sure you check him out. And if you're not already, make sure you check me out at LiamPicksFights on Twitter, dropping knowledge, trying to help people out and sharing what I got for you guys each and every time. So you can find me there, always picking fights, and you can also find me here. So make sure you subscribe because we talk fights on this channel each and every week, and we got a lot more to say. So give me Cheeto Vera in the featured bout, and let's move to the next one where we've got Vera, the pride of Ireland. Ian Garry is going to be putting it on the line against Neil Magny. Does he have a nickname these days? He does. The Haitian Sensation, 36 years of age here. Neil Magny coming in. Both these guys standing in 6'3" in height. Going to be a reach advantage here for the Haitian Sensation, Neil Magny. However, you know, he's going to be the big, sizable underdog in this fight. Let's go back and clear up the odds for the last fight that we talked about. It was a minus 190 price for the Marlon Cheeto Vera side and a plus 164 for the Pedro Munhoz money line on the comeback. But for this fight, Ian Garry, best available price here in New York is minus 400 on BetMGM. You're looking at the best available comeback on Neil Magny at a plus 380 price tag. When I look at a fight like this on paper, this looks like a setup fight to me for Ian Garry, right? Why? We're in Boston, first and foremost. He was supposed to fight Jeff Neal, and straight up, I think Jeff Neal is a way more dangerous fight for Ian Garry, and I felt like we dodged a bullet there. Ireland, we did it, baby. We dodged a bullet. And not to say he wouldn't have won that fight. I do think he would have won that fight. But I think that when we look at this fight, you know, this is a fight that's very winnable for Ian Garry, in my opinion. Why? I think number one, we're seeing a regression. We're seeing worse showings each time out from Neil Magny, and he's taking this fight under less than ideal circumstances. He wasn't preparing for this bout. Now he's got to take it on short notice. And you could say, the same thing's true of Ian Garry. Yes, but he was preparing for this date. He knew that he was having a big showcase fight, and he's a guy that stays ready so he don't have to get ready. Don't make me wear the t-shirt. But when you're talking about this guy, Ian Garry, he went to Brazil. He put in a camp over there at Shoot the Box, and he's trying to work on his well-rounded skill set, his Muay Thai clinch, his work on the feet, his ability to strike, his ability to grapple, his ability to wrestle, his ability to mix it up and to fight in all phases with confidence. You listen to the guy talk, he sounds like a fight analyst. He sounds like somebody who understands what's going on. He sounds like somebody who's very well adept at what's going on in his division. He seems like a guy who knows exactly what he wants to do. By the way, he talked through exactly what he was going to do to Daniel Rodrigues before he did it. He knocked him out. He said how he was going to do it. He said how he was going to set it up with the high kicks. And when you look at a guy like that, I respect his approach to fighting. I respect his intellect for the game, and I respect his well-rounded nature. So yes, I'm Irish. Yes, I'm biased as shit. But I'll tell you something else. I think that this guy is the real deal Holyfield. And when it was Shavkat Rakhmonov fighting Neil Magny, I said that I thought it was a lock. I said that I thought it was, you know, one of the easiest spots ever. I said that the plus 420 on the submission prop was the ultimate gift. And guys, did you watch the fight? It was the It was a gift. It was a gift. It was a gift that will never be given again. I've said this before, and I don't say it with disrespect. I say it with love and affection. Neil Magny will let you know where you're at in the division 100%. But when it comes to the top guys, when it comes to upper echelon guys, Neil Magny is a fish on the mat. And I feel like Ian Garry has not gotten a chance to show his shark-like nature on the mat, which he has shown off on the amateurs, which he has shown off in some of his regional footage as well. But I also think, I like to listen to what these guys say in interviews. I like to listen to how they're talking in the lead up to the fight. And Ian Garry seems pretty damn set on knocking out Neil Magny in this fight. And Neil Magny's chin is regressing big time. Guys, I bet Max Payne Griffin lost that bet. I'll own that. But I thought Max Payne Griffin won that fight, and I was there in person. Max Payne Griffin rocked the shit out of Neil Magny. He had him on wobbly legs. He chased him around the octagon. Neil Magny has evaded death. He skirted the lines on a couple of occasions. He's been knocked out brutally before. He's been in really brutal, long 4-round fights before getting flatlined by Santiago Ponzinibbio before. And at 36 years of age, I think he's got somebody who's too young, too hungry, too athletic, too skilled, too well-rounded. I think this is an Ian Garry steamroll. So give me Ian Garry. Give me Ian Garry, probably inside the distance. At the end of the day, I haven't bet, on this fight yet, but I like the Ian Garry side, and I think he's going to win. And a lot of people are talking about Neil Magny as a live underdog. God bless him for it. If he turns out to win this fight, I'll come back here and mea culpa. I'll own it. But, I got to call it like I see it. And I think if I wasn't Irish, I'd be picking Ian Garry. But I'm picking Ian Garry. I'm waving the flag. And I'm ready to go. I'm ready to support our Irish brother here. And I think he's going to finish Neil Magny and assert himself in the division. Plain and simple, period. And by the way, let it not be mistaken. He called out Neil Magny. He got the Jeff Neal fight. And who does he get at the end of the day? He gets the fight he said he was going to get. And it's Neil Magny, and he's taking his spot. Give me Ian Garry. Next up, Mario Bautista taking on Damone Blackshear. And Damone Blackshear is, not a fighter that I really have gotten correct throughout his UFC run. I maybe have paid him a little bit of short shrift, but I did get him right in this most recent fight. I picked him by sub or decision. And when I look at this, this is a difficult fight, right? Because I feel like Mario Bautista is a guy that I've been high on in his recent fights, but you look at the guys he's been getting, and he's kind of been getting cupcake matchups, right? Let's go back and contextualize, what he's been doing in his recent fights. Guido Canetti, he is like a 43-year-old Argentinian kickboxer. Not really, the most quality win because it was by submission, rear naked choke in the early going. Benito Lopez, I believe he was 3 years off the couch at the time of that fight. Brian Kelleher is, a good jiu-jitsu fighter, but pretty small. And, I feel like Brian, it's just a little bit in over his head in that fight. He's been dealing with injuries. He's had a couple of things going on outside the octagon. So we wish him the very best. He's a New York killer. And then Jay Perrin, who's a guy that, he went to decision with, which I got to go back and rewatch that because that's kind of shocking in hindsight. Definitely should have finished that fight. Now, when you look at the Trevin Jones situation, Trevin Jones is a guy that's got some power, but he's really not known for being the biggest knockout puncher, and he struggled to find those same results in subsequent bouts. He basically was able to pull that off against Valiev and against Mario Bautista, but never really, again, found that same level of success in the octagon. And he was able to beat Miles Johns, who I don't rate personally. He beat Jin Soo Sun, who I don't know who that is, and I watch the UFC each and every week. And Corey Sandhagen, in this matchup that they had, that was a scrap, where he got kind of routed on the mat. And now he's turned into a proactive wrestler and grappler, for sure. And the Corey Sandhagen fight, he was dealt from the bottom of the deck. But I have some minor concerns about his chin overall. Blackshear, not normally a huge power puncher, but he did come in and knock out Luan Lacerda, and I never saw that coming. So that for me is, again, I want to have some humility to the fact that I'm not perfect at picking all these fights and all these fighters. And Damon Blackshear's a guy that I've kind of struggled to get right. I thought it was going to be a subber decision over the weekend, and that was correct. But now he's turning it around 7 days later. I feel like that's an introduction of some variance here. But Blackshear, he's got good grappling, man. I thought that twister was kind of ridiculous and a little bit of an indictment of Jose Johnson, with all due respect. But when you look at Jose Johnson, he'll be back, right? But just his grappling purely is what I mean there, because he was in a situation where he probably could have gotten out if he had just flat backed himself to the mat. But instead, he's trying to throw elbows and be too aggressive. His aggression led to his downfall there. Sometimes it's about being defensive and responsible and getting out. So I think that when you're looking at, a guy like Damon Blackshear, he's a guy that's got good grappling. So do I expect Mario Bautista to leverage that grappling he's been using in recent fights against Damon Blackshear? I don't know that I do. I feel like he went from a really easy fight where Cody Garbrandt, is kind of susceptible to being hurt on the feet, really seemed like a guy who he could knock out and he could have some advantages against. Now he goes to a guy that's got a 3-inch reach advantage, who's 1 inch taller, who's 1 year younger, who just has the momentum of, coming off a win on his birthday where he gifted himself the 3rd twister in UFC history. I mean, I think the Damon Blackshear side is kind of interesting here. I believe he's an underdog. Let me try and pull up the odds gem number here, see if they've got this fight. I don't even think they have this fight listed yet. So let me pull this up. FanDuel's got a plus 186 on Damon Blackshear. Yeah, I find that interesting. I think Damon Blackshear is a live underdog personally, but I'm going to do a little bit more digging and due diligence before I bet that fight. But again, this is my first look, so I'm giving it to you on first look, and that's what I got. Gerald Meerschaert taking on Andre Petroski in our prelim headliner. So with that, want to just take a quick pause for the cause and say, guys, if you haven't already, go ahead and drop a like on the video and make sure that you get subscribed to the channel if you enjoy talking about these fights, because that's what we do on this channel each and every week, coming to you with guests, coming to you with the best minds that we could find. Our guy Pepe Sylvia, did he not absolutely crush that last card? Isaac Dulgarian, he bet it at plus 200. It closed plus 125. It looked minus 500, right? Just absolutely brilliant stuff. So if you guys can show some love and support, truly appreciate that. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you could go ahead and drop those below in the comment section, and we will get to those as quickly as we can during fight week. But let's get to the fight here in the prelim headliner. Gerald Meerschaert taking on Andre Petroski. This seems to me like a matchup where on paper, Gerald Meerschaert can win this fight. He's kind of a win one, lose one type of fighter, and he certainly got his hands full here with a younger guy who's got a lot of power on the feet and who can definitely grapple. But to tell you the truth, I've been a little suspect about Andre Petroski since he got to the UFC, and I felt like there's been good opportunities to play him. But I also feel like, eventually he could get exposed again. You look at the Brian Battle fight. Yes, it was on The Ultimate Fighter, so I don't want to hold it against him too much. And when you look at the fight that they had there, he was having success early. He was getting to good positions. He was going for some takedowns. He was looking all right. But when I look at, how we deal with somebody like a Nick Maximov, how we deal with somebody like a Hu Yao Zhang, a Michael Gilmore, Nick Maximov was cut from the organization. Not a bad fighter, but certainly a work in progress, right? His best win, I think, was over Punahele Soriano. That win hasn't aged great. Puna can definitely get it back on track, but certainly hasn't aged great to this point. Hu Yao Zhang, I could have just said, who are you? And it would have been very similar because Hu Yao Zhang hasn't really proven much at the UFC level. Michael Gilmore is a fighter that is, not very savvy, right? Not very good, not very UFC level. So those are all wins that I'm a little suspect of. I always say one of my biggest regrets in betting, I only put $5 on the exact method bet when I bet Andre Petroski via sub 1 against Nick Maximov. Everybody was talking about the wrestling, the grappling, all this and that. And I just said to myself, I'm like, if this guy's going to just shoot takedowns all night and put himself head first into Andre Petroski has a good front headlock series. So that's a huge liability, and a huge flaw. And that's ended up with getting, Maximov caught in that spot. Wellington Turman is a pretty good grappler. I think he's got a black belt or a brown belt under Glover Teixeira, if my memory serves. And you look at how Wellington Turman, tends to win fights. He likes to out-wrestle people, out-grapple people. He's not a very potent striker, and his chin is suspect. So to go to decision there and get the win, that was a decent enough look for Petroski, who the biggest concern about him, I would say, has been his cardio. He's been getting some late finishes, but again, it's about the level of competition. When you look at Gerald Meerschaert on the other side, he's a guy that is definitely a little suspect, but he's cashed me many nice tickets in the UFC. You look at the fact that he lost to Joe Pyfer, via knockout. That seemed pretty on brand for Gerald, right? Unfortunately, Pyfer's a guy that just wants to go out there and strike more often than not. He's got big power on the feet, and Gerald Meerschaert's a guy that you can knock out. You look at the other guys that have beaten Gerald Meerschaert. Krzysztof Jotko, that loss has not aged great, but also that was just an awkward fight where another guy who's really long and tall, Gerald, wasn't really able to get his grappling going. I believe Jotko is a black belt as well. Against Bruno Silva, he absolutely dog-walked him and beat the tar out of him. Looked really good in that fight, and looked good on the feet, and then eventually finished it on the ground. And I always say Gerald Meerschaert's a real jiu-jitsu guy, because even if he knocks you out on the feet, he goes for that choke just to claim it for jiu-jitsu like an absolute savage. So love that about him. The Dustin Stoltzfus fight, he's going out there, he's getting taken down, he's giving up some positions, but the second Stoltzfus let him into that fight, showed any signs of slowing down, showed any signs of wearing out, Gerald Meerschaert finds a way into the fight and finds a way to stay dangerous. Against Makhmud Muradov, look at Muradov in his last fight, going out there, takes down Barberena 7 million times, right, trying to get that UFC contract again. Landed a ton of strikes there as well. He submits Makhmud Muradov in that fight. I was at the casino live, guys. Everybody was not too happy because I'm jumping up celebrating my plus 550 ITD, Gerald Meerschaert, and everybody else was not too happy because I think Makhmud Muradov closed like minus 500, minus 550, minus 600 against Gerald Meerschaert. Just an absurdity. And it's because people think Gerald Meerschaert is like the worst fighter in the world, and they think of him as like a bum. But Gerald Meerschaert is a guy where you could test his chin and he looks not very good. But if you can get into an extended fight, he does have potent offense. He's stiff and awkward defensively. He's there to be hit, but he throws good body kicks. He throws good straight shots. He does damage on his opponents and he makes them tired. And if he gets into prolonged wrestling and grappling, he tends to be a guy who's very savvy. And he can find positions where he can all of a sudden turn a fight on its head. So that for me is a really compelling argument for him as a dog here. I think he matches up pretty well with Petroski because Petroski's not a guy that normally goes out there and knocks somebody's head off in the first round. He does throw big, heavy shots in round one, but he's normally trying to wrestle and grapple. And I think that he can do a decent job of that in the early going, but I struggled to see him doing that for the full 15 here against Gerald without it getting greasy down the stretch. So it's possible that betting Gerald live makes more sense because I do think Petroski is probably going to win the first round here. But the Gerald Meerschaert round 3 sub bet is like a system play for me because he prefers it. right? You look, he did submit Bartosz Fabinski in round 1, and I submitted Gerald in that, or I submitted. I bet Gerald in that fight as well against Bartosz. I thought that was a layup. But let me pull up my Gerald Meerschaert betting history because I haven't always got it right, but let's see. Yeah, I definitely had him. I had him by sub against Bartosz Fabinski, and then I did take a small bet on the sub 3 prop against Krzysztof Ziatko. So system play here. Petroski is a hustler. He will dominate this fight. I've been saying future middleweight champion. Wow. You're more bullish on him than me, brother. I wish him the best of luck, but I don't necessarily see that yet. Brian Battle's a good fighter, but still, Aaron Jeffrey also got the better of him. Both of them finished him in the second round. Both of them, he seemed to slow down. He seemed to tire in those fights, in my humble opinion. So we're looking at odds right now of plus 210 for Gerald Meerschaert, according to Bet Rivers. That's the best available comeback. And we're looking at a minus 235 chalk price tag for the Andre Petroski side here. Petroski has 1, 2, 3 fights in the UFC. Is that right? No, 4 fights in the UFC. He's got a bunch of grappling matches strewn in there on Tapology. Made it a little bit confusing. Sorry about that. But in any case, 4-0 in the UFC and taking on Gerald Meerschaert, who is a salty 10-8 in the UFC, but all 10 of those wins have come by way of finish. So Gerald Meerschaert, still a very interesting challenge. Next up here, let's take a look. Chris Weidman taking on Brad Tavares, and Chris, the All-American Weidman, taking on Brad. Does he have a nickname? No, he does not. Tavares. Brad, no nickname Tavares. That's what we'll call him. And, oh boy, guys. My first look at this is that I hope nobody gets hurt. These are two nice guys. It's the only time I'm ever going to root for nobody to get hurt in a fight. I'm going to be rooting for the over here. Let's look at what the over is priced at, as a matter of fact. So introducing this fight properly, we've got the best available comeback on Chris Weidman, plus 220 here. Surprised to ever hear that against a guy like Brad Tavares, but nonetheless, Brad Tavares looking at a minus 265 chalk price here on the Hawaiian. Brad is a guy that I have always said I rate him as a anti-wrestler and an anti-grappler, but that was, that was a couple years ago, right? Because now we're seeing Brad Tavares start to get, out-wrestled by Dricus du Plessis, which, again, that's not that horrible of a look, but he's also getting brutally knocked out by Bruno Silva. He's looking a little bit slower, a little bit more lethargic. If you had said that he got knocked out by somebody like Dricus du Plessis, that would have been no problem for me. But him getting out-wrestled by a du Plessis was a little bit concerning. When I looked at this on paper, I say to myself, another Serra Jiu-Jitsu guy, right? Another Law MMA product, another New York guy, but now he's training out of Carolina, I believe. I think he's training with Wonder Boy in Simpsonville. I think he's training at Gym O. I think he's been getting in work with those groups of people. But, oh, wow, interesting. Interesting. I'm looking at his Instagram right now, and it does seem like he's done a little bit of training rounds in New York as well in the lead up to this fight. That's fascinating stuff. But in any case, he is still 39 years of age here. He is coming off of a massive leg reconstruction, and he is 6-6 career to the knockout prop. So all of his career losses are via knockout. You're looking at a under in this fight that's being priced at a minus 115 to the over-under on Caesar Sportsbook. So Chris Weidman, guys, I've been watching since I was in high school, since I was a young man. Some of the first pay-per-views I ordered were Ronda Rousey, Chris Weidman on the bill, UFC 175. I remember it well. Great show. Beat Lyoto Machida there, put on an absolute showcase performance, called him on at the end. Chris Weidman, absolute legend of the game, but he got to the top really early. He relied on a lot of athletic gifts, and I did bet him in his last fight, guys, and he broke his leg in the first round. So I am not going to be rushing back to the window inspired to bet on the Weidman side. Really debilitating injury. And it's one thing if you get a really debilitating injury and you're, 25 and, you can put it all back together. But it's just a different thing when you're 39 years of age trying to come back here. And I want to bring up the point that I don't think most people have watched the Owen Livesey fight that he had in Polaris 23. But guys, I did watch that fight at the time it happened. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I can't really, be excited about his debut unless he looks like he's going to be, in better shape and condition than this, because obviously a lot lower stakes. That was all the way back in March. So he was just trying to get some competition back under his belt, want to give him that respect, of course. But, he just didn't look like himself. He didn't look like he was as explosive. He ended up losing that grappling match. And so, it was like an emotional return for him. And, I hope he gets a big moment with the fans. I hope they give him the due respect that he has earned. But, he's just a hard guy to support with your hard-earned dollars at this point, barring a big comeback here. So, yeah, I don't love this fight for betting. Because the other thing is, even from a total standpoint, like Brad Tavares tends to be a decisionator. He doesn't tend to be a big knockout guy. But, Weidman in his last fight, he didn't even absorb any strikes. He threw one strike and the fight was over. He's a guy that the fight is the bet's never cashed until the final bell has rung or he gets the tap or he gets the win, because he's had a bunch of fights where he's up 2-0 and then he gets knocked out in the third. And again, I'm not trying to kick a man while he's down or anything, but we are just trying to be objective on this show and don't want anybody to part ways with their hard-earned dollars here unless they do their due diligence. So just a heads up there. Next up, we've got a greasy one. Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues is taking on Denis Tiuliulin. And this is a middleweight contest between two guys that normally like to stand and bang it out on the feet. And I think that has cost Gregory Rodrigues some brain cells and, some consciousness, right? He's been knocked out 3 times now in his career. He's been decisioned twice as well. His recent run of fights has been quite sketchy. He got the win over Julian Marquez. I don't know exactly how to rate that. Marquez, typically a durable guy. He knocked him out there, so that was cool and a good win. But the Chidi and Njokuani fight, guys, he took a ton of damage. That fight easily could have been stopped. That fight, he took a horrifying level of damage, right? He needed his face sewn back together. And then he goes out there against Bruno Ferreira and gets brutally, viciously knocked out in that fight. He got brutally, viciously knocked out by Jordan Williams in the UFC back in 2020. He got brutally knocked out by Bruno Lopes back in 2014. So at middleweight, he has been knocked out brutally 3 times in his career. He was on the verge of being standing TKO'd against Jin Young Park when he's standing TKO'd Jin Young Park. So he's a guy that fights with a lot of volatility. You could have flipped the Jin Young Park and the Chidi and Njokuani results on his head, and this guy would have been cut from the UFC. So RoboCop's a fun guy with a fun style, and he's got great jiu-jitsu, no doubt about that. He trains with good guys. He surrounds himself with the right people, but he just doesn't proactively wrestle and grapple. And you could point to the matchups with Ferreira. It's going to be hard to proactively wrestle and grapple that guy. He's built like a refrigerator. You're going to have a hard time proactively wrestling and grappling somebody like Petroski, not because he's the world's best grappler, just because he's a guy that's a good anti-grappler, kind of like a Brad Tavares, as a matter of fact. But, a Julian Marquez kind of seems like a tailor-made matchup for him. To go out there and beat on the feet. Chidi and Njokuani, he did end up using his jiu-jitsu to take him to the ground and TKO him on the floor. However, you know, why is he going to decision with the Disco Todoroviches of the division? That is not a great look. He knocked out, Josh Fremd in the first round back in 2021. So he was having a little bit of a run, but he seems like a guy who's very rocky, who's a little bit back and forth. And he's a guy that likes to get the first round knockouts and being, dangerous early on the feet. And against a guy like this, that's just a terrible idea because Denis Tiuliulin is not a great grappler. He's not a very willing grappler. He doesn't want the fight to be there. But on the feet, this guy is a dangerous fighter, and he can knock people out, and he can hit very hard, and he can even extend people who are good grapplers. You look at the fact that Ikram Alaskarov, a guy who's been running roughshod over the UFC since he arrived so far, and his only loss in his career is to Khamzat Chimaev. He went to the third round with Denis Tiuliulin. He looked like he was getting a little bit fatigued trying to take this guy out. Alyashkov Kisriev, good grappler, very dangerous guy. And I think that Alyashkov Kisriev is, a really sound fighter. Jin Young Park, better fighter than I thought. I thought he was a good fighter, and then he kind of underperformed against Anders, so I got off the boat a little bit. And then against Araev, the guy looked like $1 million. He looked like $1 million against Tiuliulin as well. This guy's ground game is coming along leaps and bounds, fight over fight. So you look at it, Tiuliulin on paper, and he's got a really salty, bad record. He's 35 years of age. He's Russian. He's not checking a lot of boxes you want to see, but he's got a 2-inch reach advantage here. He does have knockout potential, and RoboCop is coming back off of a brutal knockout loss. That knockout loss was in January, so he's taken about 6-7 months off here, and I believe he's had a baby in the meantime. So I think if he's wise, he's going to take this fight to the mat. He's going to try and mix in his grappling. Let me look at what the odds are here. So I'm only seeing odds on one book for this right now. Rodrigues by sub is plus 163. I mean, you just won't see my money at those odds. That's terrible. Terrible, terrible odds. Yeah, I don't like this, honestly. I don't like these odds for this fight. So let's look at the money lines here according to OddsJam. We've got minus 350 on Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues. That's on Caesar Sportsbook, best available. And you're looking at a plus 285 on FanDuel. The under 1.5 rounds here, sitting at a minus 165 on WinBet. That would kind of be my lean here. I feel like both these guys are live to finish, and probably by either method for RoboCop. So, yeah, I kind of lean towards the under here. Don't love the chalk, but that's my first look here. That's my gut feeling. Let's go to the next fight on the card, folks. Maryna Moroz taking on Karine Silva. Rematch. This is a rematch here, ladies and gentlemen, where Maryna Moroz, I believe, submitted Karine Silva in their first meeting. Is that true? Is that true? Let's see if I can find this here. Yes, all the way back in 2014, November 1st, 2014, Maryna Moroz, at 23 years of age, submits 20-year-old Karine Silva in the preliminary card of the XFC International Tournament. Fascinating, isn't it? Rematch all these years later, a fight that took place in 2014. 9 years later, these two women will do it again. And they seem to be at slightly different points in their career. Karine Silva, having just arrived to the organization, she has a record of 16 wins and 4 losses as a professional. She comes in riding a 7-fight win streak here over a fairly low level of competition, I would argue. She beat Yan Kwikwi on the Contender Series, and I did bet her in that spot. I bet her by submission in that fight. I bet her against Poliana Botelho as well. I thought that was a winnable fight. I thought Ketlin Souza was going to make it a more honest fight, so I didn't bet that fight, and she made it look really easy there as well. But this is a fight where it should be more honest and competitive, I would have to assume. You look at Maryna Moroz, she's 6-0 in her career to the submission. She's never been submitted in professional MMA. She's never been finished in professional MMA. 1-0 career to the KO prop as well. She lost her last fight to Jennifer Maia. Not a great look, but Jennifer Maia is kind of a girl that could stall you out a little bit, eke out those close decisions. You look at what she did against Jessica Ai. I thought she got outboxed there, but she landed enough strikes that cut her face, and she ended up getting the nod there. So she knows how to have some vet savvy and win a close decision. But she submitted Agapova, slammed the door in her face. Mayra Bueno Silva, who's about to potentially fight for a title, she beat her via decision in March of 2020. Sabina Mazo, she beat her via decision in March, in March of 2019. So she has done pretty good work, but sporadically in the UFC. She hasn't fought with all that much regularity. She's had a ton of canceled bouts, but she is a girl that has real skills. Losses to Angela Hill, Carla Esparza, and Valerie Letourneau over the years. But again, this is a rematch of a fight that she did win back in the day. So understandably, she's been taking some underdog money this week, plus 130, currently the best available price on Maryna Moroz. And you're looking at a minus 150 chalk price on the Karine Silva side. You're looking at an under 2.5-year price at about a plus 115. So fascinating fight. And Moroz, a 4-4 record in fights that go the distance. However, Karine Silva 0-1 in fights that go the distance. So you have to think that this is a fight that could definitely end inside the distance. But I also think this could be, one of the fights where maybe the vet savvy decision comes into play for Moroz. So interesting. I'm going to do my due diligence in terms of tape before I go too hard on an opinion there, but kind of early gut lean towards the underdog. Next up, we've got Andrea KGB Lee taking on Natalia Silva here. And Natalia Silva, very popular prospect, very well-liked girl. She's going to be the much smaller individual here according to the height and the reach statistics. I believe that's been the case her last few fights. Let me take a look. Definitely against Teresa Bleda. She was the much smaller fighter. She was about the same size as Victoria Leonardo and got the finish there. And she was much smaller than Jasmine Jasudavicius, gave up 3 inches of height and reach to Jasmine, who is proving herself to be quality, in terms of her abilities. And, this is a really good win streak she's put together to start her UFC career. Jasmine is a wrestler. She brings in those skills. That's what her bread and butter is. And she also brings in determination. She punches on the feet. You look at Teresa Bleda, and Teresa Bleda is a girl that came in with a lot of acclaim, that trains with good girls, that's got a lot of physicality, that's big, that's strong, that's long. And she got absolutely told what time it was by Natalia Silva. And when you look at Victoria Leonardo, Victoria Leonardo is a girl that has struggled in terms of durability at times, injuries at times, fragility a little bit. Lexi says dropping by to hit the like button, setting the example for everybody. Appreciate you, Lexi. Hope all is well, my friend. Appreciate all the kind words. Shout out to my guy YBB, sharpest chat in the game. He says, appreciate you, brother. That is a friend of the show. He says, can't wait to hear you talk about why Chris Weidman will win this weekend. My man, I would love it for the great state of New York. It would do a lot for us, but my man, I just don't know. It's a really tricky one for me. Shout out to Danny P UFC says, no clue how Moroz isn't favored here. Round 1 meme or bust for Silva. I tend to agree. Natalia Silva is the real Silva, says Mbaye. And I like that commentary as well. We did talk a little bit about Weidman already, pimping, says Mike Morris, my man. Appreciate you. So sharpest chat in the game. Appreciate all you guys for rocking with us. Let's move along here to this next fight. To this other side of the matchup, I should say, with Andrea Lee. Let's talk about Andrea Lee. Her last fight lost a split decision to Macy Barber. That was a close one within the margins, but, at the end of the day, I just feel like Andrea Lee, I haven't really seen the same level of motivation, the same level of grit, the same level of want from her in her most recent few fights. You look at the Viviane Araujo decision. Vivi's another older girl in the division, another elder stateswoman, if you will. And Vivi was able to get the win over her. Cynthia Calvillo, that win is aged like, like cheese, right? It just hasn't aged very well. And not the kind of cheese that you could leave out, right? The kind of cheese that if you don't put it back in the fridge, it goes bad in, 3 hours, right? That kind of cheese. Antonina Shevchenko getting the win there, on the mat, that just seems a little bit elementary. Going back, you look, she loses to Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne is a really difficult test for women, as we saw with Macy Barber. But you look overall 5-5 in the UFC for Andrea Lee. And, when in doubt, zoom out. She's 2-5 in her last 7 fights, lost split decisions to Lauren Murphy, Joanne Wood, Roxanne Modafferi beat her by unanimous, Viviana Rucci beat up by unanimous, Macy Barber beat her by split decision. So I just don't like what I've been seeing from Andrea Lee lately, and I feel like her motivation hasn't been quite what I was expecting to see from her. Whereas Natalia Silva, she showed some early career losses. If we take a look, she lost to Maryna Rodrigues via decision all the way back in 2017, but since then she has rattled off a 9-fight win streak coming into this fight. So yeah, I feel like this is going to be a very good opportunity for her to come out here and try and apply her skills and probably win by knockout or decision in this fight. Yeah, interesting point from our guy, Uncle Weezy. The greatest stats in the game. Shout out to our guy, Weezy. Make sure you check out his work. Great guy. And my Pub Sports Radio brother, he says this is a different matchup for Silva from her last 3 fights, which I do like to look at match archetypes. All 3 here were against pure grapplers, so there's a chance Lee could win minutes at range, but I'm picking Silva here. Yeah, me too. I'm going to investigate that, see what I can find on the regional tape, Wheezy, and see if I can, maybe dig into that a little bit and find an edge. But overall, let's just talk about Natalia Silva, 5-1 to the KO prop, 7-2 to the submission prop, and 2-2 to the decision prop. So there you have that interesting point, Weezy, about what happens if this fight becomes a range kickboxing match. How does it end up getting scored against the bigger woman in Andrea Lee, who's gone to all these split decisions? Maybe she finally gets one to go her way in Boston. Who knows? But I'm not going to be laying the chalk price on Silva. I can tell you that. I do think she wins, but at minus 340 in WMMA, it's meant to make you cry. Plus 280, the best available comeback on the Andrea Lee side. And guys, that's where we're going to have to leave off for this card, because the truth is I have very little to offer on the Kurt Hollabaugh and Austin Hubbard fights. What I always do is at the end of Tough, I go through and I just watch the fights. I don't really have time to watch the drama and the BS. I watch too many fights and too much stuff about the fight game each and every week that I don't need that kind of extra drama-laden reality TV show bullshit in my life. It's just not for me. I wish everybody well. I like The Ultimate Fighter from back in the day. I used to watch them all on YouTube at night when I was in high school and I was a little kid, watching the first season of The Ultimate Fighter. That stuff's all great. Watching tough smashes and the rise of guys like Robert Whittaker, that was cool. But nowadays, it's just a tired concept for me. So I'm only going to watch the fights. But in any case, you got Kurt Hollabaugh taking on Austin Thud Hubbard. And I did mention earlier this week in a breakdown that I did with, Just Win, that I felt like this was a breakdown, where it kind of requires you to look at this underdog, Kurt Hollabaugh, seriously at plus 148, plus 150. Kurt Hollabaugh, he's a guy that's really struggled at the UFC level, but I just feel like he can present some challenges for Austin Hubbard. You look at this guy on paper, 9-1 career to the submission for Kurt Hollabaugh, so a difficult guy to out-grapple, and the guy that did submit him was Shane Burgos after he dropped him in that fight and then followed him to the ground. Shane Burgos got the armbar from out of nowhere. Them New York boys will teach you a little bit about jiu-jitsu. Shout out to Shane Burgos there, Section 9 in the building. But in any case, Kurt Hollabaugh was on a 2-fight win streak, was thinking about retiring, got the call for The Ultimate Fighter. He said, I guess I'll do it. And since he's been, on The Ultimate Fighter, he went out there and he's been getting wins and getting finishes, I believe, on this show. So I'm going to look into his fights. I'm going to see how they looked exactly. But from what I've heard, I've liked, a lot of the Kurt Holobaugh experience. Austin Hubbard on the other side, got to give him the credit that he went out there and beat Max Roshkov, who I think is a good wrestler, who I think is a good fighter. And I think that, that was something where it surprised me at the time that it happened. But I thought Joe Selecki was going to go out there and just absolutely submit him, right? They call him Joe Gracie. This guy gives up his back in almost every grappling exchange. Let me look and see what my betting history is on Austin Thud Hubbard, because I don't think I've ever bet on a Kurt Holobaugh fight. I'm quite certain about that. Let's take a look here. If I've ever bet Austin Hubbard. I don't think I have, actually. Maybe no track bets on Austin Hubbard. Has he escaped my wrath? Yes, he has. Yeah, I guess he has. Well, in any case, we can take a look here. And Austin Hubbard got wins over Julian Lane. He's very washed. Kevin Agnew, I haven't watched that fight, but he's 5-0. I mean, he's way more experienced than him. He lost to Vince Pichel, Joe Selecki, Mark Madsen, and Davi Ramos. So he lost to a bunch of good grapplers in the UFC. And Kurt Holobaugh seems like he's got some dangerous grappling of his own, but I'm just going to have to do a little bit more tape and a little bit more due diligence before I have a strong opinion here, one way or the other. Let's talk about Cody Gibson and Brad Katona. Man, let's pull up their recent resumes. So prior to the show, he beat Cisco Rivera. He lost to Ray Borg. I think he got pretty systematically out-wrestled in that fight. Talking about Cody Gibson, he had a 3-fight win streak. He beat John Dodson. That's a good win. He got submitted by Adrian Diaz via guillotine choke. He got submitted by Manny Gamburian via guillotine choke way back in the day in the UFC. So guillotine chokes, oh my God, 3 guillotine choke losses. That's been his absolute kryptonite here. I think that is brutal. Seems like a real concern against Brad Katona. Let's see if Brad Katona's got any guillotines on his record. Yep, 1, 2. Oh, he's got 2. He could add a third to that record. He submitted the undefeated Borislav Nikolic at the time. Borislav was undefeated, and Brad Katona submitted him via guillotine choke. Only guy to ever finish him. So Brad Katona, another Irish guy here, SBG Ireland product. And I think that this is a fight that's winnable for Brad. 31 years of age, still a young enough guy, came into the show on a 4-fight win streak. He lost to Merab Dvalishvili and Hunter Azure. And Hunter Azure, I know, kind of flamed out, but Merab, he'll take the confidence from anybody. He'll make you think you're not able to wrestle, you're not able to grapple. But he did get a win over Bryce Mitchell and Kyler Phillips on The Ultimate Fighter. The last time he was on the show, beat Jay Cuccinelli to win the show. So he could become the first guy to win the show twice. And I think he's going to do just that, as a matter of fact. I think he's going to beat Cody Gibson, and I think it's possible that he submits him. But I'm going to have to go back, like I said, and watch the show, update myself on these two guys, because I haven't seen their most recent body of work on the show. So huge blessings to you guys. That is the entire first look at UFC 292. We got it done in less than 90 minutes. Shout out to the 63 people that are still rocking with us live. I want to let you guys know a couple things before we get out of here. And if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and fire them off in the chat, and I'm happy to address those as well before we head out of here for the evening. But first and foremost, guys, just want to say, if you want access to my bets, if you want access to all the information that I compile throughout the week, as soon as I put it out, it's all available on Patreon. It's linked below. I put a lot of time, effort, energy into it to try and give the best information possible. And I come here each and every week and tell you guys about it as well. But if you want first access, if you want to help support the channel, things like that, you can go ahead and take a look on Patreon. People are giving a lot of positive reviews more and more people signing up every day. So appreciate you guys for the support. God bless each and every one of you guys. Thank you. Want to mention a lot of people are not going to be able to tune in live to this episode. I totally understand. We're coming at you live after 2 a.m., almost 3 a.m. here on the East Coast. So if you guys want to take in this show via podcast, please go ahead and leave a 5-star rating and review on whatever podcast platform you listen on. You could find the link to the show on Spotify in the description below, but you could find us on all major podcast platforms. Simply search Liam Picks Fights and you'll easily find the show. So I appreciate the help. If you guys can leave a review, it helps other people find the show. And I put a lot of time, effort, and energy into these conversations. I try and really think about the fights, give you guys my best guesses, my best predictions, my best look ahead, and then I do the research, the due diligence, and really try and put myself in a position to succeed and try and put you guys in a position to succeed as well. So if you guys enjoy the show, if you enjoy being a part of the conversation, I appreciate each and every one of you guys that makes it the sharpest chat in the game. We don't use that term lightly. So thank you guys all for the support. And I want to just say, if you guys have additional questions, comments, concerns that we didn't get to on the show, please go ahead and fire those off in the comment section below. If you have your favorite bet of the week, anything that you want to get off your chest, anything you want to let me know, please communicate that in the comment section. I'm very receptive there, and I try and make sure I get back to everybody. So appreciate everybody that drops a comment, everybody that likes the show, everybody that gets subscribed. Every one of you means the world, and I appreciate it. In terms of the comments that we've had from the folks in the chat, Spaffron says, is price on Aljo going to get better when the filthy casuals start betting this weekend? I think the price on Aljo is going to continue to drop as we get closer to fight time. I do think the liability on Sean O'Malley is going to continue to grow in the lead up to this fight. That is a personal opinion of mine. I could be wrong about that. I think sharp opinion will come in on both sides in this fight, as a matter of fact. But I think when you have sharps on O'Malley as well as the public on O'Malley, I think eventually the liability will build. And I wouldn't be surprised if O'Malley closed here, plus 180, plus 175, something like that. But again, that's an early week read. When I come back to you on Thursday, I'll have a much better read, and the limits will be much more opened up. Danny P says, Halaba looked incredible against Knight, man possessed. Love to hear that, man. Sometimes we see the Ultimate Fighter have that effect on people. Think of Matt Serra and what he was able to accomplish coming off that show. Sometimes it just takes a reset, a reframing of your career, and, shortening that goal. It really makes it just 3 fights to a big championship, and I think that's doable for a lot of these guys, a lot of these vets, and I feel like the guy who's got a little bit more vet savvy is the guy that you're saying is coming in like a man possessed in Halaba. So I love to hear that, brother. And it gives me a little bit more encouragement to look at him as a potential live underdog. Uncle Weezy says, nice work, Liam. Hard work pays off. Thank you, brother. One day at a time, one bet at a time, one breath at a time, one stream at a time. You know me, my man. Never getting ahead of ourselves here. We've had a little bit of success lately. The best bets on the Contender Series last week, 3 out of 4 of those came through. Was excited about that. This week, 2 out of 4 of the best bets came through, but we did hit that nice plus 340 on the Mara by sub bet tonight on Contender Series. So good stuff on Contender Series. 2 weeks starting off hot, profitability on the best bets article 2 weeks in a row. And then on the last UFC card, Jacqueline Amorim by KO plus 1,600. I was so excited to hit that bet. We did talk about it on the show here as well. Posted up those receipts on Twitter at LiamPicksFights. Y'all can find all my stuff there. But I did, really try and impress that upon people that, when the ITD is minus 130 and the sub is minus 115, it's a clear choice. You got to go with the ITD, pay up that extra 15 cents. And I think that there's a lot of times when people can make better EV choices, and small decisions like that in terms of EV can add up so big over the long term. It's hard to win, right? We know it's hard to win. So the question is, how can we win more? How can we, take every dollar and cent that we can? If I'm going to bet a personal win by sub and the fight ends by sub is 10 cents different, I'm foolish not to take that prop. I'm foolish not to shop around and make sure that I'm getting the most equity for the best price in the market. That's what I should always be shopping to try and do as a bettor, as a customer, as a consumer. So shout out to you guys. I am looking already at a couple prop plays for this week. That's how I'm looking to target this card so far. But I'm definitely going to, continue to dig in and see if there's any money lines that I want to get involved in. A lot of wide lines on this card. So it's probably going to be a fight card where I got to get a little creative, where I got to try and pick my spots, pick my battles here a little bit. And I've been having some good success with the long shot props. So I'm going to continue, dancing with what brought me and trusting my gut and going with that. So shout out to our guy Fight Talk Only says, who's more likely getting their submission finish? Karine Silva, Blackshear, or Aljo? That's a fascinating question, my man. I'm going to say Blackshear is most likely. And the reason I'm going to say that is because I think that his level of opposition is the least proven among those names. Karine Silva is a very dangerous woman, and she could absolutely win by sub. However, she would be the first person to ever submit her opponent. I think Aljo definitely has a chance to win by sub as well, but I do think that Sean is not a complete fish on the mat. I don't think that if Aljo gets his back once, it's going to instantly be a submission every time. I think they could get into some hand fighting exchanges. And I've mentioned the fact that I think Aljo is live by all methods. I do think he is live by decision. I think he's live by knockout. But the only way Aljo wins a decision here is if he completely dominates Sean. I do think that they will rob him if it's in any way close. That's a personal opinion. Who beats Blackshear first? The scale trying to make 136 twice in 7 days or Mario Bautista? Have we confirmed, Uncle Weezy, that this is taking place at 135 here? Yes, it looks like it on Tapology. Interesting. Interesting stuff. I'm going to shout out Danny P here as well. Says Spivak plus 150 versus Gon. Caceres plus 180 versus Giga. Santos plus 120 versus Blanchfield. So are you asking me to pick one of those three, or are you asking me my opinion on all three, brother? I'm going to assume you're asking my opinion on all three. So I'll be super brief, and I won't give too much game away here. But what I'll say is I think that, I think that the dog that I would be most bullish on of those three, and I'd have to give it some more thought, right? This is obviously just off the cuff. But the dog that gets my attention the most in that list is the plus 180 on Caceres versus Giga. So I won't explain that. I'll have to let you guys guess a little bit on that. But yeah, when I look at those three sets of odds, the one that catches my eye the most is probably the plus 180 on Giga. But I think all of them have some merit, but I think Blanchfield, is a really interesting challenge for Talia Santos because Talia Santos is very physical. She's very strong. But I do think to myself, maybe the technical edge is going to go to Blanchfield there. And a lot of people really like that Talia Santos side. And by the way, y'all that have been around this show for a very long time will remember that we were on Talia Santos and we did get robbed. That's okay. But we were on Talia Santos when she was plus 400 against Shevchenko. She beat that woman. It's all good. But in any case, when we look at that, I definitely just lost my train of thought. But when we look at that fight, I don't think of Santos as a girl that her jiu-jitsu is super technical. I just thought of her as a girl that had good enough jiu-jitsu to compete. And I thought of her as a girl that was physically strong enough to compete. And I think that Blanchfield is freakishly strong for her size. I don't think she looks as strong as she is, but I think that what really sets her apart is just her knowledge of technique and her ability to compete in those positions. So, I think the grappling edge there goes to Erin Blanchfield. But if I was her manager, this is the only fight in the top 5 that I would have ducked, that I would have avoided. And I just feel like this is, her swimming in the deep end, her taking a hard fight, and really showing that she's not afraid of a challenge. She's not afraid to fight anybody who's tough in the division. My guy Fight Talk says, okay, if O'Malley gets his flashy knockout, what round does it happen? I think this is a fascinating question, brother. I think if it happens, it's either in the first round or the 4th or 5th round. And the reason I say that is because I think Aljo can get caught cold, and I think he can slow down. But I think if he gets through the first round, he tends to be in a really good rhythm. He tends to be a good fighter about getting to a position and changing the complexion of a fight quickly, and also tying it down and making it go slower, right? Look at the Jan fight where he takes time to pause, smile, look at the camera, give a thumbs up, talk to Ray Longo. I feel like Aljo manages fights knowing his cardio isn't elite. And I think that is something where he could not do that in this fight and sell out and gas out. But I feel like he's going to make sure that if he goes for the finish, he has the finish secured. He's got the position dead to rights. I think most of the time in this fight, he could end up being a touch more conservative in some of those grappling situations. But even still, when he did that, he still gassed out in his fights, and he still needed to be very careful in rounds 4 and 5 and really be judicious with his output. And I think that against O'Malley, that's something that's hard to do. I think he can bring pressure late with his volume. So that for me makes it interesting. I think he's alive for an early knockout and a late knockout, Fight Talk. And I know that that's a little bit wishy-washy, but I'm kind of saying I don't think it's going to be in round 2 or 3 personally. I don't think it's going to be a Justin Gaethje, but I think it's going to be in round 1 or rounds 4 and 5 if he was to pull it off. That's my gut. And there you have it, guys. 3 a.m. Last question of the night comes from my brother, Fight Talk Only. He says, do you favor Cheeto round 3 finish or a Munhoz split decision win? You know what, brother? Cheeto round 3 or decision. I like that. I think that's a smart thing that you just brought up, man. That's a really good point because I do think that Cheeto could go to decision here, but I also think that, he's a guy that kind of applies pressure more as the fight goes on, and he builds up his attack. And I think that that's what I expect to see here. Sean Meneses says, will Ian Garry cover a -500? I mean, listen, it's subjective here, right? I'm not a future teller. I don't know. And I have some biases, right? I disclosed the fact that I'm an Irish guy. I'm a proud supporter of the Irish, but I think that this is more a Conor McGregor and less a Shannon Dobson, right? Some people before were saying, Ian Garry, he's never really beaten anybody good. Listen, I understand. He's a guy who's on the come up. He beat Daniel Rodrigues. That's probably his best win in the UFC. He beat Gabe Green, a guy that when he doesn't get knocked out, he's normally a really difficult guy to beat, and he did end up beating him via decision in that fight. He knocked out Jordan Williams in the first round. He beat Jack Grant and Mateusz Figlak, 2 pretty good Cage Warriors fighters in Cage Warriors as well. So I think he's built up his career the right way. He called for this fight and didn't get it, and then he got it by mistake. And now, instead of Neil Magny having a full training camp, Neil Magny's coming into this fight on shorter notice. And he's always prepared, right? He's always ready to go 15 hard minutes. But I feel like Neil Magny is a guy who's going in this direction, down. And I feel like, Ian Garry is going in this direction, up, right? I think Ian Garry is a guy on the rise who every time we see him, he gets better, trains with world-class fighters, goes to Brazil to put in extra work to get better at his skills, to get better all around, to put himself around champions. He goes to South Florida. He didn't stay in Ireland, right? And with all due respect, I think that you can get very good, world-class anywhere in the world. But to get the best looks, to get the best training, to get the best partners, sometimes you got to travel. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And that's what he's done all around the world to the best places to get the best looks with the best training partners. And a lot of people that train with Ian Garry tell you that this guy's a problem, that this guy's fast, that this guy moves really well, that this guy's better on the ground than you think, that this guy hits really hard. And against Kenan Song, he showed when he faces some adversity, he deals with it well. Kenan Song ended up getting flatline starched in that fight. So I feel like Ian Garry, a lot of people want to hate this guy, right? He's got an attitude. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's very confident in himself. He's brash. That will attract a lot of people to not like you. But I'm seeing a lot of love for Neil Magny. And, I think that a lot of it's price dependent, and I think Ian Garry is probably going to rule the roost in this fight. That's my honest opinion. I think that he could win this by all methods, and I think he's going to get it done inside the distance. I think he could flatline start somebody like Neil Magny, but I think it's much more likely that he ends up having a attritional beatdown of Neil. He targets all levels of the body, head, neck, face, right? And then he busts up the legs as well with his calf kicks. I think he's going to be doing a lot and picking him apart. So there you have it, guys. Said and done. Liam's first look. Thank you guys for tuning in. God bless each and every one of you guys. I hope that you enjoy the fights at UFC 292. If you want more information, all of it is in the description box below. If you guys want more fight talk like this each and every week, shout out to my guy Fight Talk Proprietary. But if you guys want to hear fight talk every week, if you guys want to discuss these fights, if you want to understand them better from an analytical and betting standpoint, then come on down, join the sharpest chat in the game, get subscribed, drop a like on the video, and show some love because we're here doing it each and every week. And make sure you come back next time because we're having all the same fun again. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you.